everyone, welcome back to the Live Global Relief podcast. We are recording this episode on Saturday, the 8th of February. My name is Erin, and I'm here today with Arwa to talk about her home country of Lebanon. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, Erin. How are you? I'm good, thank you. And thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to interview you. Thank you so much. I'm well as well. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit? Maybe tell us what you study, what your interests are.
Yes, for sure. So, my name is Arwa, and I'm a computer science student. And I actually grew up in Lebanon and moved to the UK when I was 15. I really enjoy various different things, such as traveling, reading, and journaling.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for telling us about that. Today we're going to be talking about Lebanon, and we're going to touch on the recent ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah. Um, I'm just going to tell our listeners a little bit about what's currently going on in case they weren't aware. However, it's important to remember that today we have limited time on the podcast, and we recognise that we can't cover every aspect of a complex situation. And we encourage our listeners to use our podcast as like a starting point to inform their own research about global issues. So, on the 27th of November 2024, a ceasefire agreement was reached after a 14-month war between Hezbollah and the Israeli Defense Forces. Hezbollah is a Lebanese Shia political party and paramilitary group who are fighting in solidarity with Hamas. The agreement was that Israeli forces should withdraw from southern Lebanon and Hezbollah should move north of the Litani River by the 26th of January. However, this has not been respected by Israel. On Sunday, the 26th of January, at least 24 displaced people were killed by Israeli soldiers when trying to return to their homes in southern Lebanon. 2 weeks on from the ceasefire deadline, Israel has continued to open fire on civilians in Lebanon. The deadline for the IDF to move has been extended to the 18th of February. This is obviously heartbreaking news, and it must be incredibly hard to see that the ceasefire agreement is not being respected. How is the news coming out from Lebanon affecting you personally?
It's really heartbreaking to see this happening in my home country, especially having grown up there and having all my memories there, and just seeing how it's just has become worse and worse as I left the country as well. It's really heartbreaking. It's also even more heartbreaking when you know the people there and those people that you know are not safe anymore and they are not under like the best conditions. So it can be really difficult sometimes to handle. But what we I always try to remember that I am here now in the UK, for example. If I'm granted better opportunities, then I have to utilize them as much as possible, and I have to make the most out of that. But it's always our hearts are with the people of Lebanon.
You saying about being here in the UK, do you ever find it sort of difficult to be here when I feel like Lebanon and the suffering going on there seems to not really go acknowledged here in the UK? I don't think I hear people talk about it very much.
Yes, actually, that's something that I noticed is that people don't really know much about Lebanon and don't really speak about it. So I just like to go to back to before the war even started. So first of all, Lebanon is a very beautiful country. It has so many nice advantages that is not found in any other country in the world. Uh, and that's something that even like tourists from all around the globe, they know this about Lebanon. Um, but especially the Lebanese people, they love their country so much. And in the past, I would say 5 to 6 years, the conditions started to get worse. So, first of all, it was never like perfect in Lebanon. There was always this political interference from other countries. There was always this like political arguments between different political parties in Lebanon and so on. But I would say that the condition was kind of stable, even though we used to have electricity cuts and water cuts and all of those things that in the first world countries, if you tell them that, they think like, oh, what is this? But in reality, this is something that Lebanese people have grown up with and they were used to every day. there was always this sort of instability, this sort of like feeling that, oh, I cannot live in this country forever. I have to travel abroad to seek better opportunities and to strive for a better future for my family and so on. But then it was kind of manageable until the the late 2019, when there was a revolution that happened, and a lot of the Lebanese people wanted a change in the political system, and they were asking for a change because they wanted a better Lebanon. And then soon after, and because the government wasn't really receptive of the revolution, there was no change made, unfortunately. After that, there was like a huge financial crisis in Lebanon. So $1 used to equal 1,500 Lebanese liras. And then just soon after, there was a hyperinflation, and the $1 is actually now equal to 89,000 Lebanese lira. So imagine how people struggled so much with that. It was during COVID times, and then people's salaries, for example, suddenly dropped massively, and everyone was really struggling. And that's when there was a huge rise in people leaving the country. We were one of them as well. And we 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 wanted, like, as Lebanese people, we wanted a better future for our country, but then we also, sometimes you feel that you cannot stay there, even though unfortunately this is sometimes not the best decision, especially when you miss your country
Yeah,
and you're
yeah,
attached to it. But at the same time, people started leaving, and unfortunately after that, like, the situation kept the same in like 2021 kind of thing. There were a lot of issues um that like during that time. So I'd like to highlight as well that on the 4th of August of 2020, Beirut, which is Lebanon's capital, witnessed one of the most intense non nuclear explosions in history. And that affected people to die. And I wasn't there. Like, I'll tell you my story. I moved like out of Lebanon on the 30th of July of
okay,
2020, and then just 5 days
yeah,
later that explosion happened. And although I did not experience it, it affected me
yeah,
massively,
of course,
because we just saw how it affected like Lebanon in general. And then the people, you feel like when you spoke to the people at that time, you would feel that they have like post traumatic stress
yeah,
disorder,
yeah,
and they were just really struggling mentally and emotionally for a long time after that. And then 2021, 2022, 2023 passed, and so on. Certain aspects were like improving, and then certain aspects were not, unfortunately. Also during that time, the electricity cuts like increased massively. For example, before 2020, the electricity cuts in Beirut used to be around like 3 hours a day, but then it was like most of the day.
okay,
Maybe the electricity used to come for 3 hours,
okay,
and all of this just made the situation really sad. Um, but then now, when all of the Gaza conflict happened and all of that, um, and in like the late months of 2024, the war started on Lebanon, and also I wasn't there. It always felt a bit weird not being there.
yeah,
It felt like, why am I not there? It felt like I was betraying my country and my people, because I wanna like share their pain, and when you're not there, you don't really like fully understand what they are
yeah,
going through. But being Lebanese and knowing, for example, all like the areas in the country and all of that
yeah,
made me kind of like understand a lot. So I was always present with my friends and family, I always was like reaching out to them and trying to stay updated with everything. Um, and all of that was definitely like affecting all
Yeah.
of us
Yeah.
in a like we were very emotional all the time.
Yeah, and it must be really hard. You're constantly reaching out to family and friends. You're really aware of what's going on in your country, and to like kind of have that going on almost in the background while you have to continue with life here, where it is obviously relatively peaceful, and like people don't really, a lot of people don't understand what it's like to have that and to live in fear of your family like not being safe. Um, do you ever, I think you sort of touched on it, but is there sort of like a guilt that is attached to being here while that is going on in your home country?
So yes, when so actually before the war had started, when I would tell people I'm from Lebanon, especially here in Liverpool, they sometimes would be like, "Oh, that's the first time I meet a Lebanese person," or "Tell me more about Lebanon. I don't know much about it." And I noticed how there's very little awareness
Yeah.
on Lebanon. For example, people were more educated on some nearby countries
Yeah.
like Palestine and
Yeah.
Syria and so on, but Lebanon specifically, I noticed that people just were not educated enough about it, and I found that like lack of awareness really concerning because
Yeah.
it is a very beautiful
Yeah.
country that had been struggling, but then a lot of people were just misinformed or not informed at all. And then when the war started, um, people started asking more, especially like people that are like Arab or from ethnic backgrounds were even more like sympathizing with the
Yeah.
situation. They were checking up on me sometimes, but then still I found even then there was a
Yeah.
huge lack of awareness with some people that just don't care. Maybe they've heard about it, but they don't really care much. I don't know if people would be really like shy to ask because they are afraid that like it would affect me emotionally. So that's like my good assumptions about them, that
Yeah.
maybe they didn't want to bring it up so that it doesn't affect me in any way. But at the same time, um, yes, I did notice that um, it is not like I did notice that there needs to be much bigger awareness to the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And I did feel a lot of guilt being here in
Yeah.
the UK because I started feeling that I could have been just one of those
Yeah.
people. You know, we have no control over which areas were being
Yeah.
targeted. It was a lot of the cities in Lebanon and the towns that were being targeted, but it was mostly in the south. That was where most people like had to evacuate from their homes. Unfortunately, I'm not from the south. I'm from Beirut, so the people in my surroundings um, didn't really all evacuate. So some of them did if their like targeted area were um more under like attack.
Yeah.
There is the suburbs of Beirut, which is the Dahia, which was attacked a lot, and that area, it's just like also so heartbreaking to see all of those areas that were massively affected. But then even if it's just one apartment in one building, it still matters, and it's still really sad to see. And we used to not sleep at night because we want to know like what's happening.
Yeah.
Most of the attacks used to happen at night, so when we want to go to sleep, everything starts. And even during the day there are attacks,
Yeah.
but it was like escalating during the
Yeah.
night. And then I used to notice that I was sleeping very late, like 3 a.m., because I wanted to see what's
Yeah. You
happening.
want to know.
I would be messaging my friends all night and them telling me all of the updates. And just like also, I would be checking the news and stuff. But it's different when you have someone there
Yeah. Yeah.
to talk with, because technically, when you're like talking to them on like all the time, they would hear it,
Yeah.
like they would hear the explosion
Yeah.
before it actually is the reported
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
news. And that's what hits different.
Yeah.
And then even though I wasn't there, I felt very like emotionally invested
Yeah.
in all the
Yeah.
situation. But I was always trying to remember, like to remind myself that I am here. I'm gifted with the opportunity of being safe
Yeah.
and of being in good conditions. I'm granted the opportunity to study, to work, to improve my future, and that is the only way I need to give back to my country, is to focus for now.
Yeah.
Because if we have um, a lot of like successful Lebanese people abroad, that's when people will start noticing it
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
People will start noticing that, oh, this person comes from Lebanon, and so on, and then you will have more opportunities to speak out on
Yeah.
Lebanon
Yeah.
and help out.
And just going back to what you were saying about people asking you about Lebanon or not knowing much about Lebanon, do you ever feel afraid that now, obviously, it is reported a little bit in the news because of what was going on with Israel? Do you fear that people view Lebanon as this country defined by the conflict, or like, I think it's really hard with a lot of countries, like in the Middle East, they have this like, I think people, especially like the West or the UK, have this idea that they're countries where war is going on and they don't, there's nothing else to do with them. They can't think of like the culture, they can't think of the language. They're just like, oh, there's a war there, there's something going on, it's not nice. Is it hard to see people just associate Lebanon with conflict when obviously to you there's so much more to it?
Yes, definitely. Because I noticed that whenever I bring a very simple fact about Lebanon, people are sometimes like surprised and they're like, oh, wow, really? Uh, I was just mentioning to a colleague like the other day that in Lebanon, there's a ski season, there's snow in
Mm-hmm.
the mountains, and it's very
Yeah.
beautiful. And they were just like, oh, interesting. And I noticed that like people who just hear about like a country that, oh, there's war happening in that country, they start thinking that that's all what
Yeah.
really like is attached to that country, and they don't remember that this country has people
Yeah.
who are just like us. They
Yeah.
have their own dreams, they have their own life goals, and all of that. They are all working towards their future goals and all of that. And it's never just that there is war. I want to tell you something, that even though the war was happening in Lebanon, all of the universities and the schools continued normally. They were studying online, but they were continuing. So imagine some people were like not knowing if they're going to be alive tomorrow, but they would have like to study and continue um, like watching some recorded material that the uni professors have put for
Yeah.
them. And that's all really difficult to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it was a very, very tough time for the people in Lebanon, this shows their resilience and how strong they are.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, like no matter what is happening to them, there's nothing stopping them from striving and working hard, whether it's their work, whether it's their studies, um, whether it's anything. They are always resilient and hardworking.
Thank you. And go back to what you were saying about receiving sort of like live updates from your friends. It must be hard to have like a very personal attachment to what's going on, because it's very easy for people in the UK or in a country where they don't know anyone in Lebanon to sort of read the headlines and be informed, but not really comprehend it. Like, you'll see numbers, millions of thousands of people injured or murdered, but they can't comprehend that. Why is it to you, like, why is it important that people keep learning about these issues, and how can people stop becoming like desensitized to all of these numbers?
We, as people living in the West, can can become like really busy and focused on our own lives, and we sometimes will forget like that other people in other countries exist as well. And that's a problem when it makes you like completely unattached to like
Mm-hmm.
what's happening around you in the world. Because even though it might be a different country, we are still under the same world, and we're all like we're all people um who are like the same in the end of the day. So we all should sympathize with each other. I think that people, even if it's like a very busy week of your life, you have to take out some time of it and research like what's
Yeah.
happening, to read more about what's happening around you in the world, be updated. Even it's like great if you're watching this podcast and listening to that's great because you're like taking time out of your, like, for example, free time, and you're trying to educate yourself about what's happening. And you should do that with like a lot of the issues
Mm-hmm.
that is happening, not just Lebanon or not
Yeah.
just Palestine
Yeah.
and so on, but everything that is happening around the world needs like attention. And and yes, I think that people have to read more, listen more, and maybe it is really good to hear from personal like stories rather than just rely on the news, because the news might not cover
Yeah.
everything and you will not get the full idea of what's happening.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely agree. I think it's really important that people take that time out of their day um, to do research. And this podcast is all about people doing that and giving people um, somewhere to find like factual and like unbiased information, because I think it's really hard when people inform themselves only with social media. Obviously, social media is a great way, especially if you're seeing photos from people that you know, like coming out of these places. But yeah, I think it's really important that people educate themselves and take the time to find like factual information. Um, you touched on this a little bit when you were saying how you remind yourself you're very grateful for your safety. And I just wanted to ask, how do you sort of balance staying informed and reading news or speaking to your friends and family in Lebanon, while also looking after yourself? You're a student yourself, you have things to do, you have a life here. How do you balance that, and how do you make sure, how do you keep yourself emotionally sort of safe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way I was coping with all of what's happening, and I continue to do so, is to kind of have a routine for myself. So, first of all, I'll tell you just some of the coping mechanisms that I've used. So, one of them is exercising and like staying active, looking after my body in a way that I can release all the tension and the stress, but then also continue to remind myself that, like, oh yeah, I'm given that gift of, being strong and able, so I have to take care of it. And it's always that feeling that I noticed that when the war happened in Lebanon, I started being so much more grateful for the little blessings,
Yeah.
because the roof over our heads or the blanket that we cover ourselves with while sleeping, it's really like a big blessing
Mm-hmm.
that some
Yeah.
people have just evacuated from their homes. They are homeless. They were homeless at the time. They had evacuated from their homes and they had no like place to stay
Mm-hmm.
at. And that's just, the idea of that is just crazy, because we have so many little blessings that we forget that we have. So the way I was always coping with that situation is to remind myself of that,
Yeah.
and try to make the most of what I already have. And then the other way that and it is closely related to the first way, is that I'm religious. I'm a Muslim,
Yeah.
and having that relationship with God, with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, is something that I held like closely to,
Mm-hmm.
praying constantly, reading the Quran, and just making so much like prayer,
Mm-hmm.
which is called dua,
Yeah.
to God, is the way that comforted me a lot, and comforted like a lot of the Lebanese people as well, because when we feel out of control, out of all like situations that's
Yeah.
happening around us, there's always this reminder that God is there. He is capable of everything. He is capable of stopping the war, of returning the situation to be better. And this always made me feel better. And then um even when it stopped, we were always thankful
Yeah.
to God. So that's, I would say, that spiritual presence was really key for me to cope as well. And then also, the third thing, maybe it was like setting a certain time for
Yeah.
myself to listen to the news and stay updated. At first, I was always
Mm-hmm.
like all the time on my phone, just wanting to like hear all the updates. But I noticed that it started
Yeah.
affecting my ability to like continue with my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't want it to do so, then I started trying to like set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, 2 hours before bed, no more news.
Okay.
During like when I'm studying or working or so on, I wouldn't like go on my phone. I wouldn't check on the news and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Thank you. I think hopefully that is helpful for anyone who is also struggling with having family in places like Lebanon or in conflict areas. I would want to move away a little bit from that now and maybe ask you more about Lebanon in general, because, like we said, it's not defined by suffering or conflict. What do you miss most about your home? What makes you happy about your home country?
So if you're asking me what I miss the most, I immediately think about the people.
Yeah.
Uh, the people that I always miss is something that is really hard, because I noticed that when I moved to the UK, I always was looking for people who were like the people
Mm-hmm.
there, and I never really found like the same kind of people. Even people who maybe are ethnically Lebanese will be different than the people who there are, like, Lebanese living in the country. And I noticed that that is because the people, when is that because when you grow up with certain people and you create those memories, they'll never be recreated anywhere
Yeah.
else. So I miss my family. And by the way, a lot of my extended family are already living abroad now.
Yeah.
And we all love to go back one
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But uh, also, there are still like big portion of my extended family that are still living in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And then there are my friends who I grew up with, and I went to when I was at school. So I miss those people. But what I actually also miss a lot about Lebanon is that, aside from the people, even if there were like no more people that I know in Lebanon, I still miss the country in itself, like the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
Lebanon, I miss in Lebanon, I miss the streets, the buildings, the nature of the country, the weather, um, the culture. For example, when walking in a street in Beirut, you you would pass, for example, near the grocery store, and the owner of that grocery store would know you, would know a lot about you, and they would just like talk to you. And that's something that you don't really find in the UK. Like here, people are more to themselves, and they don't like um they are not like this much close like with other people, or they put up like strict boundaries with others. But in Lebanon, it feels like it's like everyone is like one family kind of thing, even though there is a lot of differences within the people in Lebanon. For example, there is a lot of religious diversity.
Yeah.
There are Muslims, there are Christians, and there are Druze as well. And among those religions, there's also different sects and denominations and so on. And with all that, Lebanese people love each other. And even though there might be some conflicts that happen sometimes, which is normal, but it is a country that preaches like acceptance of others, and everyone still loves each other at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Do you have a particular place in Lebanon that is your favorite place to visit? Is it in Beirut, or is there somewhere in the countryside that you really enjoy visiting?
Yes, there is. And you just reminded me of a place in the mountains. It's called Souq al Gharib. And that town is the place where I spent most of my summers during my childhood. So it is a place in the mountains that has a very nice view, very nice weather, and so much greenery. And I have so many
Yeah.
memories with my family, with my cousins growing up from both sides because, yeah, from my I have memories from my mother's side of the family, but then mostly with my father's side of the family, and it's also beautiful. Um, I love this place, and I would say mostly because of all of the childhood memories
Yeah. Yeah.
that I've made there. Um, and to mention something about this place is that the fact about Lebanon is that in the summer it's a bit warm in Beirut,
Hmm.
not like too warm in a way that it's unbearable, but it's still warm because it's near like all the all the cities on the coast are usually like warmer. And then if you go to the mountains, the weather is amazing in the summer. And that's why a lot of the Lebanese people try to spend more time in the mountains during the summer so that they enjoy that beautiful weather.
Yeah.
But then in the winter, it's a bit cold in
Hmm.
the mountains, and near the coast, it's very nice weather,
Yeah.
even though it might rain, but it's not uh, like too cold in a way that you cannot walk on the streets. No, 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 no. It's actually very beautiful. And also in the mountains, um, and especially in the mountains with like that are higher mountains kind of thing, there is snow
Yeah.
during the
Yeah.
winter, and that invites like ski
Yeah. You mentioned
season.
the
And
ski
yeah, yeah.
season. Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight that. But the thing also that is very beautiful about Lebanon is that it is a very small country, and to go from, for example, that place where it's warm to, like, for example, to the mountain, it might just take half an hour. And then in another half an hour, in the winter, that also you would reach that like
Hmm.
snow. So it's very close to each other, and that's the beauty of it, is that it's all very close to each
Yeah.
other, that you can
Yeah.
enjoy so many different aspects about the country in such a short period of
Yeah.
time. And I guess that invites a lot of like that, and I think that's something that is very unique about
Yeah.
Lebanon,
Yeah.
because also it is the only Arab country that has no desert,
Hmm.
which people always think that the Middle East is all desert, but
Yeah.
Lebanon is not actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I just wanted to ask you sort of a closing question. Obviously, we've talked about staying informed and reading the news and taking that time out of every day or every week to inform yourself about things going on in the world. What would you say our listeners can do to specifically help Lebanon?
Helping Lebanon. Yes, if you're listening to this and you would like to help Lebanon, then I think that you have to be part of making the difference. Listening to the news and being updated is good, but only to a certain extent, because if we just have so much knowledge about what's happening, but we are doing no action, then are we really making any difference? No. And the way to make a difference, even though you might feel hopeless, there are still ways that you can help. The least things are fundraising,
Mm-hmm.
participate in them yourself, be part of that, organize them. If you're not finding a lot of fundraisers for certain causes, such as Lebanon or even other causes, then yeah, go ahead and organize one. Ask your friends or family um, to help with the fundraiser. Start from your start with making the difference rather than wait for the difference to prevail. And other than fundraising as well, yeah, it is when you're educated yourself, that's good, but share that awareness that you have, talk about it, tell your friends and your family about it, especially those you feel that know nothing about it. And then also, um, if you're religious, make lots of prayers for Lebanon, because we always can make that difference. Um, and hopefully, God will always accept our prayers. And then, if you can, if you and also if you can participate in any form of activism in your local community where you can raise your voice and speak about it, then do so. If you have to participate in certain petitions or so on, then do so. And never feel that your own work will be useless or not enough, because imagine we all thought about that. Imagine we all thought in that way, then we will all never do much. But if we all thought that we can do just our little part, then all together, cumulatively, we will all make a difference.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important reminder, and I hope that our listeners have found this episode helpful. And I hope that it encourages them to research Lebanon more. And like you say, start those conversations with people that don't know anything, and start their own fundraisers as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been lovely to have you.
Thank you so much as well. It was really lovely speaking to you.